everybody, and welcome back to another Jack X podcast. This is a very special episode because it's a little bit different. We're going to do our 2023 wrap up episode. I'm Carrie, and I'm back with Tom and Sebastien to talk about this year and everything that we discussed. And I don't know about you two, but it's always funny looking back at a year because the way where we ended up really isn't where we started. And when we think about 2023, at the beginning of 2023, or really the end of 22, the only word that was being used was metaverse. Metaverse was everywhere. It was the buzzword. It was forecasted to be the biggest technology development.
NFTs as well.
Yeah, NFTs were
Yeah.
everywhere. They were changing the world. And then all of a sudden, you get into 2023 and we saw a shift. We didn't
Big
see
shift.
this. Yeah, we didn't see this massive, single-minded push towards virtual spaces and virtual hubs. We actually saw a push towards using a blend of real world experiences and tech elements combined with that, kind of pushing those parts together.
I think
And
coming out of COVID, we were still on this really push virtual worlds and what have you. But then I think when we started to keep back into in real life events or even activities, I think we understood that maybe the metaverse didn't have its place in the way we foreseen it. Yeah. And so were the NFTs, I guess. Oh, and the world of
Yeah,
crypto
right.
as well. You can even think about the world of crypto and how this has perhaps not even landed in the way people had thought.
It's interesting because there was a pushback, I think, a little bit from the end users, the audience of, no, we want to go back out into the real world now. And so I think that is what really drove this pivot is, all right, well, we've been pushing this metaverse thing. People aren't reacting to it the way that we thought. Now, how do we bend it and mold it into that new desire and reality?
But to be fair, I think the metaverse is it's a buzzword. And no, I think it's just, if you put it into context, it's just a 3D world where people can gather, right? But I think there's
Mm-hmm.
possibly a space for a version of the metaverse that we will foresee that will emerge from, combining wearables, location, MRs, and all these different technologies, and it will converge into what people are calling it the metaverse at the moment. I think it's gonna just change into something else.
yeah, and you know what's interesting about this, Eb, is I mean, on a human side, or even obviously as an experiential marketer side, but from that human side, I think what we're seeing is that 2023 was a reaction to the previous years, right? Of
Mm-hmm.
like this, things were going more virtual, of course, because of a need. And that anxiety started to rise in people, right? The anxiety of us being social creatures and we need physical environments and we need these things. And per usual, the voices of the consumers were very much heard. And I think you're seeing this very big impact and that fear being taken seriously and being like, oh, no, no, we don't want a future or a world that is only virtual and we're each living in our own personal matrix. We want this. We want a heightened experience in the real world. And I don't know, part of that feels optimistic to me.
Yeah, and part of the real world is wearables. We talked about wearables, right?
Woo!
That's a good sideways. Did you see that?
That was so good, Seb.
Very good.
Yeah, so I mean wearables. I think during our episode we talked about, we went back all the way back to Nike wearables and how this kind of emerged. But I think the real winner towards the end of perhaps this year or next year is the Apple Vision Pro and the launch, and how we foresee this perhaps, being a big push through to launching AR devices or MR devices to the mass markets. Because if we think back at HoloLens and perhaps, all those devices were perhaps more B2B. The only one that actually for the mass market was perhaps the Quest, but that was very
Mm-hmm.
much, VR. But the one everybody's waiting for is the Apple Vision Pro, and what's going to come out of this, and this whole new way of interactive with content that we perhaps, we're gonna have to rethink and reshift how we're thinking about, UI and how we basically trigger things and experience things. And I think it's something I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think the UI is interesting. We're really going to have to rethink where digital things, quote unquote, live, right? I mean, we're so used to having literal panes of glass that we stare at when we're interacting with our technology, and now
I
that
think forget about your small rectangle
right,
that you're
exactly.
looking at. The canvas will be the real world.
Yeah, and we're used to having maybe like a physical calendar or physical clock on the wall, but now if it's living in your virtual space, what's the next iteration of that? And it can actually still live on your wall as you perceive it through your headset. So it's really interesting where this can take stuff, and I think
We were also talking with Carrie. With Carrie, we were discussing that phones at the moment are we're using them as things that we use every day, and it's carrying our data, personalizations, and what have you. But I think our phones are perhaps going to be coming perhaps a hard drive that we just carry around, and the real device that you're going to be interacting with are perhaps your spectacles that you're going to be wearing. Yes, you might have a phone, but it's going to be like an Apple Watch. The app. If you think about the relationship between yourself and the Apple Watch and your phone, it's this symbiotic sort of like relationship, and you can think about the wearables perhaps in future to come are not going to be standalone, but maybe sort of like working with your phone, and your phone is just going to be a hardware or a hard drive that you just carry in your pocket where all your data has been stored.
But I think that that's what's going to be really interesting to see, even with the Apple Vision Pro, right? It wasn't a left turn, but I think it was a deviation from what people were expecting, right? And I love that they kind of surprised people. But what I'm really interested to see is that there are certain things about being a human that you 100% want. You guys were mentioning some people like having a physical calendar that hangs up in their home, and those little bits of, okay, can you find a mix of the things that I want to exist in real life versus the things that are more helpful to be managed digitally. And it's a little bit different, but when we think about this, a really big launch from this year was Adobe's Project Primrose, was this famous color changing, texture changing dress. It is essentially a piece of clothing, a whole outfit that you are wearing. And on stage, one of the engineers is wearing it, and the dress completely transforms, not just in color and not just a primary color of going to blue to red and looking like a kindergartner. I mean, it was changing in the way that the fabric looked, in the quality that it had. Was it reflective? And I mean, that is a crazy notion, because in so many ways it's like, wow, that's incredible. But the question that, of course, we're all asking is, how does it feel to wear? And
mm-hmm.
that's the big question with all these wearables, isn't it?
Is it going to be pokey, like
Yeah.
because you got all these wires, like you're going to be like feeling prickly all the way
Listen,
along
women
the day?
just got pockets in their
Yeah.
clothing. And now
Yeah,
you
right.
want us to wear a literal screen with nothing? It's like, where am I going to put pockets?
Can you bend over to pick something up off the floor? I mean, that's a pretty important thing to be able to do.
Yeah, has
I
there got any
see.
restrictions? What
Yeah,
do you guys think about the this new pin, the human AI pin? Because I kind of have got mixed feelings about it.
I am very much in the same boat as you, Seb. But I think the promise is there, and I think it's exactly to the point I think that you were getting to before. Of if your phone no longer becomes the way that you interact with the digital world, it just becomes a way to house it and store it. I think the AI pin is an interesting take at the other, or how you can interact with the world around you and with the content that's just streaming to you all the time without having to stare at a screen.
I just wonder if it would have had the same sort of like exposure if it had been other people other than those like leading Apple guys.
Mm-hmm.
Um, do you know what I'm saying? I don't know if it's the hype is because of like those big figure from Apple worked on this, or is it gonna have like a real genuine impact on it?
Seb, how dare you? I mean, tech is never about the hype,
I
okay?
know
This
that,
is
yeah,
really
right.
pure.
Yeah.
This is a real pure industry, okay?
I think it's a creature of the timing too, right? So much of it is reliant on the AI capability. I mean, ChatGPT, it's not been confirmed, but a lot of people suspect that ChatGPT or OpenAI at least is central to this thing happening. And ChatGPT and generative AI as a whole has had such a meteoric rise, certainly in the middle part of this year, that I think they kind of needed to get it out because they just needed to ride that hype train and the coattails of that too.
It's interesting though, and just we're talking about the humane AI pin, which is essentially it's disconnected from a phone. It can operate completely on its own, and it's meant to be this ongoing, persistent guide with you at all times that you can ask anything you want, and it can give you this magical answer. But very much with a lot of the things that we talk about in this space, this application kind of does fall down for me while it lives as a silo. If it's connected to what Seb was talking about, of connected to your phone as a hard drive, sure, maybe you can start pulling up your apps. It can be easier, but right now it's all still much too public in my mind. Now, if you combined those powers with some really sleek AR glasses, like the Nreal glasses, so that everything felt a little bit more private, a little bit more contained,
I mean,
I
do you
think
want to
we have a
use the
real one.
human pin like on the underground when everybody can like look at your hand and it's like,
You're reading your text.
Yeah, or listen to the speaker. They say it's a personic speaker that only you can hear, but I'm sure if people are close enough, which happens on the underground quite a bit,
Yeah.
they might be able to hear your messages, right?
The amount of relationships alone that would end just by overhearing people's texts. I mean, come on.
Right.
No, but that combination of technologies, I think, is what's interesting. And this conversation comes up time and time again for us. I think it's very much a theme, and it's definitely a theme with one of the other topics that we talked about, which was the location mixed reality. And we were talking. This was when Adobe's Arrow came out, and this is in connection with Google's Geospatial Creator, which essentially allows you to lock digital content, into a specific place so that it engages with the real world around it, which is this kind of merging of real world data, from Google Maps, with then this fresh new content. And again, those are kind of a couple pieces of technology coming together to give a real nice experience as opposed to a disjointed one.
if you have like a device that you don't have to pull out from your pocket, so let's say you've got spectacles, and then the sort of like the hardware, the sort of like knows where your whereabouts, and then can put up content based on your location. But it's not just like slapped on like in front of you. It's actually integrated as part of your surrounding, because with the Google Map data, you have the ability to understand, okay, there's a building here. I know the 3D of this building, so I can put my content on the top, on the face of the building. Or if I want to have something going at the back of the building, I can make use of occlusion and making content feel that it's part of your surrounding, essentially. And coming back to what we were speaking about earlier, that your canvas now is no longer bound to an X and Y coordinates, but it is actually the whole space all around you. And that's kind of key to create the next generation of immersive content.
Mm-hmm. A thing that I keep trying to think about is, how do we take the best of what we've learned in these pandemic, everyone's in their own space interacting with stuff on screens years, and apply it to the desire to be back out in the real world. It's what can we augment in the real world with fun, engaging, interactive content, digital content. And I think location MR is a great avenue to chase for things like that. It is kind of taking the metaverse and applying it to
Yeah,
the world
absolutely.
that you're in.
And for Jack Morton, let's not think about what Jack Morton does. We do like live events. So if you can create 3D content for an event, for a specific location, and have it mapped to the environment that is surrounding you, man, this is the holy grail for Jack Morton, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Even more than that, it's helping to bridge those kind of gaps that we have within an experience. Even it's gotten so much better over the past couple of years, but there are very much two different types of experience. There is an in-person experience and then there is a digital experience. And you can dial up certain factors in each of those instances to help create a more connected, holistic experience. For sure, and we do it all the time, really dialing up the digital connectivity within physical experiences. But there's still a gap. And there's still a gap because very much there isn't a single place that you can engage with people consistently on in a logical way. And so looking at the opportunity of doing something like this, of having location-based mixed reality, really allows you to bridge that gap for moments when people are passive and they're not on the event app or they're not on Instagram or TikTok, and that's what's really exciting.
They might be on GPTs, which I think could be a next good ways to go into the generative AI section
Well,
that
we're
we
all
spoke.
going to have our own private GPTs, aren't we? So
Yes,
we're going to
yes.
do
Yeah.
it
Well,
private to ourselves.
but that's what Chat GPT is kind of allowing us to do at the moment, right? Create our own set of GPTs based on our own data. I mean, you could do that if you were a developer, but now they actually democratize the whole ecosystem. So even if you're not a developer, you can actually create your own GPTs, which I think is fantastic. But obviously, before that, maybe if we rewind a little bit, there was Midjourney as a generative AI that actually made a lot of sense for us. Oh, sorry, yeah, Carrie.
No, I was just going
No,
to say, if we actually had to pick one singular topic for the year of 2023,
generative AI, hands down.
it's generative AI,
Absolutely.
right? I
Yep.
mean, this like if we had a penny for every time that that word was said, that was the big hero, boogeyman, everything of 2023, right? And for good reason, because it felt like it came onto the scene with a big splash, didn't it? It felt
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
it hit like a ton of bricks.
I mean, if you think about it, right, the big guns out there, you've got Adobe, you've got Microsoft, they all integrated like AI as part of their product line cycle. So it's you better embrace it because like there's no way to escape it.
Yeah, and I think it's the interesting part of it too. Kind of going back again to our intro of it, where metaverse was the be all end all. I think this year it started looking like AI might be that, right? AI, generative AI becomes a be all end all. But I think now that we're in a more mature phase of it, the interesting thing is seeing how people are taking the capabilities of generative AI and tying it into their own product. Like you said, Seb, Microsoft with Copilot. It's not just how do I chat to this very large language model. It's no, how do I make the large language model relevant to my emails, my Teams messages, my, everything that Microsoft can do, and leverage it on top of all of those pieces of software to make me more productive and make it more relevant to my day. I think that's where we're seeing some really interesting advancements these days.
And because this generative AI, I don't know about YouTube, but I'm finding it addicting in a way that I didn't expect. The fact is that I don't go on to ChatGPT for everything I have to do for work because it's still kind of navigating away. It's kind of breaking my brain cycle. But Microsoft Copilot, which only launched at the very beginning of November, became available beginning of November, that we've started using, and it's kind of integrated across all of Microsoft's 365 applications. And so, it's kind of bringing that level of helping you write, helping you critique, helping you review and summarize all these different things that are going across, your Microsoft applications, which is amazing. But the place where I get most frustrated is I'm like, "Ugh, okay, so you're just locked into Microsoft? Like, I need you to know what's going on in my Google Calendar too." So that addictive quality, what I mean by that is I already want it to expand. I'm already like, the convenience of this is very much tied to how widespread it is and how well it knows me, which I found really interesting, let's say, about myself.
That's a valid point. So, are we gonna have our own GPTs that? I mean, are you gonna have like a GPTs for work, a GPT for your own personal life? That's kind of because I'm not a Microsoft person outside work. I'm more like a Google sort of like person. This is just personal preference. I think other people have like some other views. Some more people perhaps are more like Apple like. But I think you're right. Is there like a GPT for work and a GPT for my personal life? And depending on what I'm doing, I will tap into the different assistants that is available. That's an interest. I didn't think of that. Actually, that's quite interesting.
Or do you even go a step above that, and it's now there's a Seb GPT and a Carrie GPT and a Tom GPT where you set it up and you say, here's my work email, here's my Gmail, here's my work calendar, here's my Google Calendar, so that when you go to book a dentist appointment, for example, you're no longer having to reference, okay, am I good on my work calendar for this time? Am I good on my personal calendar for this time? The GPT just knows all of the things going on, and it can say, here's your perfect time to book that dentist appointment.
Yeah, so if you think about how your phone, I've got my work emails on my phone, so that would be
Mm-hmm.
the perfect place for this kind of GPT to work, right? On my phone, where all these services converge. So again, we're going back to this like central device that has the ability to do everything that you need, but maybe there would be different layers. Your Apple Watch, your Apple. I'm saying Apple because these are the only ones I know, but it could, you see what I'm saying? There might be different type of interfaces interacting with this device that has
Mm-hmm.
all the capabilities.
And different filtering
Yeah,
mechanisms.
yeah.
One of the most interesting things that I think we've been doing is we've been playing with all these technologies that have been coming out. We've been testing with and playing and putting into some of our experiences, and some really, I'm going to call it fun because I'm not building it. Seb's building it. But Seb's, been piloting, making these private GPT libraries, right? Where we can funnel in our research data and then it becomes searchable. And so by closing these things off, you can think of it as, yes, it's much to maintain, all that stuff. But what's really interesting is you can think about, oh no, this is stuff we have. And I just want to be able to pull information from it faster and more efficiently. And that's been cool to look at those little tasks and say, how can this change?
Yeah, and it's basically small GPTs, not trained because they're not trained. We're not fine tuning. We're just making the GPT to look at a specific set of data, right? So basically they can answer questions about a specific domain, and I think it's very interesting. I'm not interested about you to answer about how men have managed to get to the moon. I'm only interested in a specific set of data, like a strategy piece of information, set of documents, or how we could have a tool internally that would help people to implement sustainability within the business. And there's tons and tons of documents. So being able to find the right answer very quickly is very convoluted. But by using ChatGPT, we can actually help people to surface the information and also give them access to the right documents. And also, if you combine this with real-time 3D, we've also been prototyping how we could have virtual guides. So again, using things like private GPT, which is a GPT that you can run locally without interfacing with the internet, and have a conversation with your data. So you basically ask a question with your voice, and then the GPT looks at its set of data, and then we generate a voice again using AI on the fly that gives you back the answer. I mean, this you can see easily this being put into visitor centers, for instance, for people to find their wares or find more information about specific things. This is not like sci-fi. It is there. We've done it.
And I think a big driver, and here's my best attempt at a sub segue, so let me know how this goes. But I think a big driver behind these things is there's a big backlash to where does our data live, right? And it goes back to our decentralization episode that we did. There was my segue. And I think there's a lot of clients, there's a lot of people in general that generative AI came out, ChatGPT came out, and people were suddenly throwing everything at it, the kitchen sink at it. But then there was this moment of taking a step back and saying, hang on, where does all this data go? And do I have an issue with my data, maybe my client's proprietary data, which we would never do, but some other people have done it. But where's this data going to? Is it going to train the model again, expand upon it? I think there was a real interesting and quick, very fast pivot to, okay, how do we start to wall these things in so I know what data it's referencing? Does my data go anywhere? Does it stay central, or do I own it still? I think there's been other big things like, Google Takeout is a tool that's actually been out for a while, where you can literally take all of your data out of Google and you say, I want to take it, move it somewhere. But if you look at the Google Trends, search trends data for Google Takeout, June of this year, again, right, kind of in the middle of all this stuff of where's my data live, there's a huge spike in interest in searches around Google
What happened
Takeout.
in June of this year then?
We tried to find the source of it. I think it's literally, people started thinking about it more because of all of these conversations around what data are you feeding into tools and all this stuff that's out on the internet now.
Well, and we had a couple year buildup of also being like, if data is going to be a commodity, why can't I have mine? This bit and this kind of questioning of being like, when the internet was in its earlier years and it was like, oh yeah, I'm trading my attention and maybe some light data about me in exchange for free content. And as that grew, and obviously as these banks and banks of massive amounts of data grew, and we started to have leaks that affected real things, whether that was the US election or other ones that were, people losing their banking data. I think just that bit of being like, we can't have a digital world. We can't exist digitally with this idea that our data is a free for all, that it is a commodity for somebody else to own, and that I just have to accept that. And yeah, so I think that pushed it as well with this kind of AI bit.
Because you have to host so much data in order to leverage this new AI technology, betting on the right partner, as in at the moment there are not so many, so it's not a big deal. But companies are going to have to host that or put their data somewhere in a trusted environment. And if they start putting all their data in one location, it's going to be centralized, right? And it's going to be really hard for them to go somewhere else, because they're going to put so much energy and so much research going to go on, with one specific partner. So I appreciate what you're saying, Tom. Decentralization is great, but with this new era where we sort of like the tools need to know exactly how the data is looking, and because it so much has been done in the background with those documents, and we have all this data in order to generate those responses. I just don't see how this decentralized model is going to work in the long term.
Well, there's an interesting thing of the dev date, OpenAI dev date. The most interesting thing that stuck out in my head is when they announced the Assistance API, which you can have data retention, knowledge retention. Sam Altman specifically said anything fed to us through the API will not be used to train the model. And so to me, that was OpenAI noticing the concern that people have around all this and saying, if you interact with a specific way, then we guarantee that it won't be fed into our model training and so on. So,
but when you put a document for ChatGPT to analyze, even through the API, it generates a bunch of numbers in the background,
yep.
which then the LLM can look at and generate answers from.
Right.
That data, that database of numbers, has to be hosted somewhere, right?
Yep.
So again, this won't be decentralized. It will have to be somewhere. And as you progress through your adding more and more documents, this database is going to grow bigger. And I'm just thinking, decentralization in terms of data is going to be much harder for companies to do, because of this tight relationship that we're going to have with those LLMs. Possibly, I don't know.
There is a big tech budget to be spent in order to do that. But you are starting to see some companies do it. I mean, Mozilla has pivoted off of IRC and Slack and things like that for their communications onto the Matrix protocol, which is fully decentralized. There was a big call around the middle of this year for Slack not being end-to-end encrypted, and people suddenly kind of woke up to that. Again, I think it happened in June, same time as this Google Takeout spike in insert. So something happened in June where people are starting to really think, hang on, where is my data? Who owns my data? And, I don't think it's fully figured out yet, but I think there is a desire and a drive to decentralize, or to at least know where your data is allowed to go and who's allowed to do what with it.
And to not be dependent on a single one, right? I think we brought
Mm-hmm.
up the crypto industry earlier, and that's a really good potential parallel to these AI, generative AI companies. You had great success on some of these different marketplaces. Coachella had massive, application and great success with their NFTs on FTX. And then boom, like that, FTX is gone, and everything that existed within there that people invested in is gone too. So I think from that side of things, the fickle nature, it's going to be hard to push people to, and I mean individual people, to invest their time, energy, and effort into either building these things so they are more personalized to themselves, to feeding things in, if they're really fickle. And so, that's, I feel like that's going to be something that really stays persistent, right? That challenge of how do we address this? How do we kind of balance this safety and security with also access? That brings us to a really interesting point, because a lot of the technologies that we're talking about throughout this are kind of coming together once again, a brand new culmination, or not a brand new culmination, but in synthetic characters. We spent a whole episode talking about synthetic characters, and how they've changed over these years and kind of the rise. But the biggest change comes with being able to add AI, and especially generative AI, to these characters to make them interactive, engaging, but also ongoing.
I think that is going to be a big jump for these characters. We've all seen previous iterations of things like synthetic characters, not exactly yet, but very scripted, very kind of robotic. And so, yeah, I think
Jilted.
generative, jilted, weird speech patterns, things like that. And I think being able to put this conversational dynamic, I think the big part is dynamic, where you're not going to get, even if you ask it the same question twice, you're not going to get the exact same response back. Really gives a character and a personality to these entities.
Dynamic is such a good word, Tom. I'm so glad you used that, because I do feel like we are at the very beginnings of the dynamic technology age, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you want to think about even metaverses, what are they? They're just more dynamic web pages, what you're able to do with that. And there has been this promise for so long that technology is going to react to you, that it is going to be personalized, that it is going to be all these things. But we haven't seen that until recently. And it does feel like this is a whole new generation of technology. Technology isn't net new, right? But this dynamism that's coming with it is very new.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about even content, this is actually becoming more dynamic, right? Even the way the images are being created. If you look at like Midjourney and how it creates the images and iterated over, several iterations, and it feels like when they're coming to life, it's kind of like fluid and more dynamic. And even a static image is no longer a static image. You can actually make a static image move, so like everything is going to react to everything else.
Or you can literally generate a static image on the fly. So how static is that if it's a thing that you can just in an instant say create X, and an AI somewhere will create that thing?
Yeah. I mean, to come back to the synthetic human, I think we discussed Replica, right? The an AI chatbot that is customized to you. I mean, if you think about, say, and I think some people have thought about this before us. People who have died, you could possibly generate an AI chatbot based on their history conversation, and so you could actually speak to, that person has passed away. So that could be an interesting format for keeping those people alive. But then you could also think about this about a bit more of a creepy way, where you could have a virtual girlfriend and this type, or boyfriend in that matter, and this actually exists, I believe, in Japan, where physical relationships are not so, I wouldn't say so popular, but could be harder to get connection with people. So having this digital relationship with an AI character could possibly facilitate more emotions. I don't know. Is it kind of creepy? Maybe. Is that gonna cause more problems down the line? Maybe. I don't know. We're gonna have a new generation of like
Yeah.
introvert people. Maybe. I don't know.
Well, until the synthetic characters have physical bodies that they can join us around
Oh
us, and
yeah.
then we're at full Star Trek level, then
Yeah.
no, I think this year has weirdly filled me with a little bit more optimism than probably I felt in 2020, when it did just look like there was a voracious appetite for no one to be social again, and that there was an appetite to push things towards a fully virtual nature. And I think 2023 was surprising. Not for everybody, but for some people and in different areas. And that's that human nature part that's hard to plan for in equations. And that's the thing I find probably the most exciting about what we do, is because those are the unexpected things. How are people going to use these tools? Where are they going to be the most prolific? And what won't be that interesting to us just in our normal everyday lives?
But Carrie, I think what you mentioned it a bit earlier is most of these technologies are not new. AI, for instance, is not new. It's been around for like many years. It's just that now we have the technical ability to take it to the next level, and also the research that's been done around it has moved leap forwards. And also AR is kind of not new, but the technical ability that we have to execute it now has moved forward so much that it can now enter the mass markets.
And I think what's new with this year too is this is the first kind of time where all of these things existed together, right? And that's what's interesting, is now how do we take these things and piece them together?
Absolutely. And how they're going to like merge and transcend to one another. Absolutely. And you can see the merge between, you know, those wearables and AI and mixed reality. They're all going to converge into like this one uniform entity, and it's going to be part of our daily life.
I completely agree with both of you. And I just can't kind of get over this feeling I'm having that we are kind of in this very beginning stages
Yeah,
of
there's this
this
pivotal
really big
point.
shift, this
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
really big fundamental industrial revolution size shift. And I feel like we can feel it in how much conversation is going on around us and in the way things are changing in all these new combinations. Uh, and I'm excited. I'm
Yeah.
excited to see what
Me
the big
too.
thing is next year, for sure.
I mean, maybe we probably want a bit more regulation around the AI bits. I think that would be, yeah, that
Okay,
would
well,
be.
Oh
what?
boy,
We'll mark that as our first episode for
that's an
2024.
entire episode on itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, thinking about episodes, if people have like some topics you would like us to cover, it would be interesting to hear from you guys. You can reach out through some of the comments. So Jack Morton has a LinkedIn page. You could actually pop on there some of the questions. We also have an Instagram account. We are JackX, or even a Jack Morton one.
Reach out to us. Let us know
Yeah.
if there's topics you want us to cover. It's been really fun for us to start these new style of episodes in 2023, and really fun to kind of look back on all the different stuff we talked about. And with that, we will see you or talk to you again in 2024. Thanks all.
Merry
Bye, everybody.
Christmas. Bye.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Bye.